You can count on Raphael to throw the first punch, but with him appearing in nearly every episode of the 2003 show, there are bound to be some amazing and outstanding episodes for this character. So today we'll be going over the best Raphael episodes. And before we do that, let me know in the comment section below what your favourite Raphael episodes are.
The tension here in the arena is unbearable.
Boring!
Okay, first up on the list is Headlock Prime. Now, the reason why this episode is mainly on the list, and it's not really to do too much with Raphael as such. I mean, this episode has more of a focus on Raph as being the main lead in this episode, but I don't think this episode doesn't really do anything for his character in terms of developing him or anything like that. But I just do think that this whole story for Raph is just a really fun adventure type story that, you know, doesn't do anything for his character, but it's just a really fun episode. Now, the main story for this episode is basically we just get to see Raph and Leonardo go to a wrestling match, and that's when Triple Threat comes in and he tries to basically claim back his title or something like that. So then that's when Leo and Raph go out and chase him through the streets and could have potentially very killed him. So yeah, overall this episode is just, like I've already said, it's just a really fun adventure type episode with all really fun, I was gonna say like wrestling type things in this episode, and with little fights and stuff like that. It makes this episode a really fun, enjoyable one to watch, but I do think this episode lacks from developing anything for Raph. Now, I do feel as though there was a lot of things that I could have explored with Raph from this episode, just because he was quite annoyed with his brothers, just because he was able to do anything he want now, because in the future and his aliens, but yeah, all his brothers want to do is stay at home. And I do feel as though that was like a really interesting thing, which I feel as though they could have explored a little bit more in future episodes, but I do feel as though it was a bit of a missed opportunity, but what we did get was pretty awesome, and yeah.
Don't slurp, son.
Okay, next up is Touch and Go. Now, again, like the last episode, this one doesn't really have much of a focus on Raph, and if anything, he's only in it for about a quarter of the episode. But I do think that the quarter of this episode is just amazing. Now, the most of the story for this episode just focuses around Mikey and Splinter trying to get home, stopping Touch and Go and stuff like that. But with the Raphael scenes, they are a lot more interesting, as you do get to explore his character a lot more in a lot more interesting ways, I would say. Just because with the Raphael story, we do get to see him look after a blind lady and help her pack her things to basically leave, but at the end of the episode, he gets the money from Mikey and gives it to her to basically stay in that apartment. Now overall, this doesn't really do too much for his character, but I do think that this definitely does show he's a lot more interesting sides about his character, and really goes into show that he's more than just the angry type character, and can show all of his different emotional levels, and I think that's just really great. Now, I would have preferred if it did do a lot more of these type of stories throughout the show, just to show a lot more of the turtles' more emotional sides from different varies of emotions, and also that could have been a lot more interesting. But I do think with this scene, it definitely does show that it does make the characters feel more realistic and more believable to being real, and just makes them a lot more better.
Just remember that if you do nothing else in your life, you were once a planet racer. Not everyone can say that. And you remember, race with honor.
Okay, next up is Across the Known Universe. And this episode is also a somewhat interesting episode, as again, this one doesn't really do too much for Raph's character, but I'll say that the whole story throughout this episode is just a really amazing fun one to watch. Now, in this episode, we get to see Raphael get teleported to a planet which I believe is in the future, and all God do on this planet is just race. And this is honestly, I'd say, the perfect type of planet that Raph could be teleported to, and I do think there are some really fun elements throughout this episode. I do think that watching Raph racing throughout the whole episode, I think it's a really interesting thing, just because up to this point we haven't really seen too much of Raph on the bike, and we haven't really seen too much of him racing. So I do think it was like a really nice change of pace for everything really. And due to the lack of actual any villains really, and actually lack of any fighting, it was actually like a really nice change of pace. Now, Raph's message at the end of the episode, I'll say it was okay. I don't think it was anything like too memorable or anything too great, but it did a pretty decent job.
What is wrong with me?
Next up is Meet Casey Jones, and oh boy, is this episode one of the best from the shows. Oh god, yeah, where do I even begin? So, in this episode, we get to see Raph's angry side finally come out after it's been building up for the past few episodes. That's when he leaves the team, more or less, and that's when he comes in contact with Casey Jones. The two have a big fight, and that's more or less it really for this whole episode, really. At the end, they do get on better terms and stuff like that, and Casey joins the team. But I do think that overall, for this episode, it's just a really interesting way to see Raph's angry side and the whole dynamic behind it with using Casey Jones and stuff like that. And I do think that the more you look into this episode with Casey Jones and stuff like that and his anger, the more you realise that just how great of an episode this truly is. And I do think that I was able to do a lot more interesting stuff with this sort of story compared to the 2012 version, where it's just basically Raph didn't feel like he was getting understood by his team. But in this one, he understood like the dangers of his anger and was able to help someone else out with anger problems, and was able to really make a really fun dynamic about the whole thing. And I do think he was able to really explore his character in a really unique and interesting way. And I would have to say that for all the things that he does for his character, it's also really great, and I do think that most of the stuff from this episode does carry on over to other episodes with Raph's anger and stuff like that. And I do feel as though this was just a really great roundup to like Raph's like anger problem from the past few episodes, and now just going forward with his character, it was just perfect.
You better take a breath and think before you act. You can't just go storming off like a hothead. Hey, listen to me, hothead.
What?
Nah, just something my brothers were trying to tell me.
Okay, so the best episode from the 2003 show, in my opinion, is Lone Raph and Cub. In this episode, we get to see Raph get angry at the team because they're not doing anything to really go out and try and find Splinter. So that's when he goes out on his own to go and try and find Splinter, but that's when he comes in contact with a kid called Tyler, and then things go from bad to worse. Now during this episode, Raph goes blind and he has to rely on the kid to basically almost like use him as a way to navigate around the city. And the thing is that Raph has sort of agreed to help the kid get his mum back from this like big gangster war, stuff like that. And yeah. Now overall, I feel as though that the dynamic between Raph and the kid is really interesting and really cool to see. And again, while I don't think this episode doesn't really do too many great things for Raph as a character, I do think that the story within this actual episode does a really great job of showing off why Raph is such a really good character in this series. Just because I feel as though this is honestly the best we do get to see of Raph, we do get to make some really great arguments with Leo and the team about why they should be finding Splinter, because again, like yeah, they're not doing too much to go out and find Splinter, so Raph has every right to be this angry, and you know, you can't deny it, he's basically in the right at this point. And then when he goes out and helps the kid, again, most of the points he makes and all the stuff that he does, you just can't deny it, he's just a really great character in these scenes, and I just wish we could see a little bit more of this all side from this character. I mean, I know that we do get to see a lot of it in throughout the show, but these scenes in this episode really, I don't know, I want to say that these scenes really do make his character stand out from the rest. But yeah, that's going to be it for today, guys. I'm quite interested to hear if you agree with this list or if you don't, because I feel as though this is sort of a really interesting one. Just because the more that I was making this like whole list for this video, the more I realised that, oh shit, yeah, Raph doesn't really have too many like focus episodes on him, but the ones that he does have are like really great. However, they don't really do too much for his character, but the ones that do for his character are just perfect. But yeah, let me know in the comment section below if you agree with this list, and if you don't, let me know in the comment section below what your favourite episodes are. But yeah, that's gonna be it for today, guys. If you do like something, please share, like, subscribe and all that stuff. Goodbye, yo, bye.